Next up, we have Roger, who's going to talk to us about indefinite articles.
And here we are, indefinite articles. What, you might be wondering, am I going to be talking about? Well, hopefully. Why does Zoom always change screens? I'm not talking about these. These are definite articles. They've actually been published, and you can read them, either in magazine form or on the web. But I'm thinking about articles before they're published. Consider articles about programming. Now, often when we think about articles, we think about what we learn from them and how we might learn from them. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what the writer learned by writing the article. And one of the things I find about articles is you learn an awful lot just by writing it. And although obviously I'm keen that lots of people read it, I actually refer to my own articles quite often to look up things that I used to know and have forgotten that I wrote down in an article somewhere. In my experience, most articles start in a definitely indefinite article form. You've got something as a topic. You've got a rubber duck. Yeah, I'll show that in a minute. You know some information. And my analogy is rubber duck debugging, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, where you explain the problem to a rubber duck or your colleague or a stuffed animal of some sort. And the mere act of trying to explain it helps you resolve the problem. And I found that with articles, the mere act of trying to form it as an article can actually improve my learning. So some of the questions that go through your mind when you're trying to turn a vague, indefinite article into something that other people might be interested in is, what do I have to do to it to actually get it to flow so that someone's bothered to start at the beginning and hopefully read all the way to the end? And then drilling down a bit, what actually did I learn? And not just what I learned, but how did I learn it? Because one of the difficulties in our industry is there's so much information out there, but how do you process it? How do you filter it? And if you can explain that in the article, that can be useful even if the actual topic of the article isn't directly relevant. What else should fit in the article? What other tools are there? What other techniques are there? What other things are there? So again, you have the opportunity for a slightly more directed search out there. Having written your program or resolved your problem, you've now got a good idea of what sort of things to look for. And you might find, now you know the answer, that someone else has been there too and solved the same thing in a different way. The other thing that's quite hard with indefinite articles is there may be things in there that you need to get rid of. They're not directly relevant. You might have really enjoyed writing that bit in the draft, and then you realize that actually it doesn't fit. Maybe it's a second article, maybe it's a sidebar, or maybe it just has to go back on the cutting room floor, to use a film analogy. And one of the other things about articles is it gives you a chance to reflect on how you wrote the piece of code, how you fixed a particular problem. The order you actually did it in may not be the best order to describe it in. For two reasons. One is it might not make much sense. And the other is you might have learned that actually you went about it in the wrong way, and it would be much better to have done it in a different order. So my recommendation is try it if you haven't done it before. Pick something you've recently learned. Maybe you were solving a problem. Maybe you were writing a piece of code. Think about it. Reflect on it. Reflect on those questions. What did you learn? How did you learn? What can you put down in a flow that makes sense? What other things do you need to include? And see if you can turn that into an article. And I suspect you'll be quite surprised at how much more you learn about the thing you decided to write your article about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roger. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Where do fake blacksmiths work? In a forgery.